Hi, I'm Paul Brodie. You know that, Mitch behind the cameras. And we're back. We had a week off. Mitch went off to France and Spain to see his children. What a good dad. And we're going to do an Excelsior update today. And I was going to make a few things in my shop, but I'm on the injured list. Today is Thursday, and on last Saturday, I was on my trials bike, and I had a small fall, but I landed on my hip, and I can't walk very well, so I'm not able to do things in the shop. But I was working on the Excelsior, and I took some images of what I was doing, so I'm going to show those to you and also give you a little bit of Excelsior background. I started the Excelsior project in 2005. I was doing a lot of work on antique and vintage motorcycles, and I decided that I wanted a project for myself. I wanted something I could really sink my teeth into it. I think that's what I told myself. So I decided on the Excelsior project because there were none. There was no 1919 Excelsior board trackers around. So I got a photograph. I got a few photographs, and I started, and I found out that I had a line of credit available to me because I had a property, and it was mostly paid off at that time, and I could get quite a bit of money if I needed to. So I did what I can only call, and I have called it as financial recklessness. I turned away all my regular customers, and all I did for 6 days a week was to work on Excelsior. So out of the line of credit, there came my mortgage payment, my food, my living expenses, and then I spent money on metal, parts, pattern making, all sorts of things, and getting castings made. So that was in 2005, and that was really quite an incredible time because there was a sense of freedom there because I was doing exactly what I wanted to do with no one to tell me otherwise, and it was great. So that was 2005, and then I got a working model in 2007. So I'm going to show you some photos now. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. I got some photos of the Excelsior, and this is a 1919 photo, I believe. It's Joe Walters, and he was part of the Excelsior factory team. And I looked at this photo many, many times in the evenings. I would sit on my sofa and try and see how the engine was built because I was going to recreate that out of a photo. So I spent hours, literally hours, looking at that photo, trying to figure out what was going on with the motor. In my shop, right over here, I set up a bench, and I had a 486 computer, and I had AutoCAD 12, and I spent hours, even days, weeks, working on that computer, trying to figure out how to fit everything, like the pistons, the flywheel, the bevel drive, and everything into the motor. And so I got it figured out how this all sets up and works. Obviously the front cylinder, the rear cylinder, and this is the mag drive, and it all comes off at almost a 45, but because of the angle, I think it's 47.5. So the miter gears had to be custom made because you couldn't buy anything off the shelf. There was all sorts of things which were going on, but eventually I got it figured out. I got the patterns made. I had a pattern maker in North Vancouver. It was Pacific Pattern, and they made up all of the patterns. And these were the castings that I got made at Globe Foundry. So the patterns were, I got the castings, and the patterns were still at Globe Foundry. And there was a part of my brain, it was my intuition, it was telling me, I should go to Globe Foundry, but I was busy working on the Excelsior and I ignored my ignition and then intuition. And then I heard a year or two later that there was a fire at Globe Foundry and I lost all my patterns. So I don't know what happened to them. I don't have them, but I got enough castings for what I want to build. This is probably back in 2006, and I'm getting close. I've got most of the castings all machined, but you can see here I don't have the cylinder heads yet. The heads were the last to get made, but it's starting to look like an engine now, and that was quite exciting. This is Excelsior number 1, and it got finished in 2007. And this is down at in California. There was a motorcycle show. I can't remember the name, but it was really high end. They were handing out cigars and cognac, and when I showed up there, I across the front lawn, I said, look, there's Peter Fonda. And you could see him walking across the lawn. And then the very next day, I was standing next to the bike and I was talking to people, and there was a customer or a gentleman, and he was asking lots of questions about the bike. You know, it was good questions. And then when he left after 10 minutes, someone came up to me and they said, have you got any idea who you were just talking to? And I said, no. And he said, it was Peter Fonda. So I was about, 18 inches away from him and talking. I did not recognize him, but I recognized him the previous day walking across the lawn. Here's another shot of Excelsior number 1. This was at the Davenport swap meet, which I went to. That was on Labor Day. It was in Davenport, Iowa, and that was a good place to go and meet people and buy some parts. This was probably in May 2007, and this is the first time that Excelsior number 1 fired up, and you can see how it burnt a hole in my lawn. That was fantastic. And then we checked the oil, and we found out that the oil wasn't circulating. And when I did a bit more looking, I realized that I had designed the oil pump and it ran backwards. And that's why the oil pump wasn't pumping any oil. So that had to get redone. This is an Excelsior Henderson. It was made in the US. It was Minnesota, I believe, and there were 2 brothers. They were the Hanlon brothers, and they got investors, and there was a bunch of excitement. And that was 1999. That was the only year these bikes ever got made, and I don't think they made a lot because for whatever reason it didn't take off. But when they fired that bike up for the first time and had it on the dyno, you know what they discovered? They discovered that the oil pump was running backwards. So my Excelsior and this Excelsior Henderson had something in common. Very interesting. Okay, this is what the Excelsior oil pump looks like. And here it's all assembled, and this is where it fits into the bevel chest. Here's the bevel gears going up to the rear cylinder, front cylinder, mag drive, and that's where it sits. And it drives off this shaft. This shaft comes down, and there's a mechanism. It's like a tongue that goes into a groove, and that's what drives the oil pump. Here's the carburetor. It's a Schebler carburetor, and this is it's the ported air sleeve. That's what they call it. It's on a bit of a friction there, and you can, as the engine's running, you can move this back and forth and open up the valve, and that sets the mixture. So I made these carburetors. There's 6 castings. The patterns were made by Jeff Willis. He's in Idaho. He did a nice job, and it takes a long time to machine up a carburetor. Here's another Excelsior that I have. It's not a standard looking one. It's a copy of Bob Perry's race bike, and it's got the high pipes on it. I call it Harry High Pipes. This is the bike that I crashed down in Florida when I was gonna run Sons of Speed race, and that day didn't turn out well. I did a lap and the throttle stuck. I think the carb iced up. I've done a little bit of research on that, and it seems very logical. The carb iced up, so I was going into the corner, concrete blocks around me, and I decided to bail and ended up in the hospital after getting a flight from a helicopter. All part of the big story. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to show you what I have been working on. I was working on some Excelsior parts. I made a couple header pipes for it. They're just really short. So I machined up the stub. This is a piece of bent tubing that I had bought. I did a TIG weld, and then I had to file down the TIG weld. And I wanted to show you this picture because how do you hold a bent tube? It's not easy. So I got a 5-inch record vise here. I got a drill press vise here that's maybe a couple inches. So I held the vise in a vise, and then I got some leather here so I don't dent the tube. And then I can move the tube around and get it to the right angles. And you can see here how I've done some filing and I've gone up to that point. And then when the tubes are all done, that's what they look like. It's done. I worked on the handlebars, on the spirals, that's what they call them. And it's a tube that fits over the handlebar very nicely with a few thou. I TIG welded in the ends. On the bottom, I filed and I sanded these pieces. This is what holds on the linkage. And I silver soldered around there. And then what I did, I took the aluminum tube and I used a little bit of press lube. I put it in the arbor press and I pressed the aluminum on. And then I had an arbor. I don't have the arbor here right now, but the arbor, it fits into the 3-jaw chuck, and the spiral fits on. There's a little bit of a taper here. And then there's an Allen screw that goes in there, and there's a split. And I open that up, and then I machine down the outside because it has to fit onto the grip, or the grip has to fit onto it. So that's the finished product. There's the spiral and the grips. I don't put the grips on yet because on the end of the handlebar, I silver soldered in an insert. It's got the thread that holds the screw that holds the spiral on. So when it's all finally spray painted and fitted on, put a little bit of grease on there, you put in the screw and then you install the grip. There's a sequence there. And then I worked on the seat. So here's the pieces that I used on the seat. Right here, I got them water jet cut. You can see what the surface looks like. And it has to be bent because it has to fit the seat. Okay, so here's the seat. It was made by Greg Hunt. He did a beautiful job. He's in Pennsylvania and very happy with the seats. I tried a few other seat makers and they did, compared to this, they were terrible. So you can see here how this fits. It goes on like that. It fits like that. So there's a slight curve here. So I had to figure out how to make the curve. So what I did, I took these pieces. This is just, I don't even know where this came from. It's pretty heavy wall tubing or pipe. And you can see here, that's where it goes. And then this piece goes over top. And I've made notes to myself. The first step is the hydraulic press. And then for some reason, the second step is to use the arbor press. That was 15 years ago, and I can't exactly remember why I used hydraulic and arbor. But anyway, that's how it all fitted together. And then I assembled it. I did a little TIG tacking. And then I nickel silvered around like that. So after it's nickel plated or painted, it'll look great. So that's basically what I've been up to. So I was planning on doing a few more things while the cameras were rolling, but I'm having a little difficulty walking. So I haven't been in my shop for about 4 days now, so I'm just taking it easy. But this way, with a little slideshow, I can show you what's going on. Thanks for tuning in. Mitch and I like coffees, as you know. If you like, subscribe, tell your friends. It's much appreciated. Take care. See you next time.